If you're a male and you worry about losing your hair, here's some news for you. It might start happening sooner than you realize. Luckily, Keeps is here. Keeps is FDA approved, doctor approved hair loss treatments for a long term solution. You get a 90-day money back guarantee. They have literally thousands of happy customers who have used their service and gotten products delivered discreetly to their door to help them keep their hair. Take advantage today of our 50% off your first order promo at keeps.com/geekdom. I'll leave a link down below. That's keeps.com/geekdom. Go there today and keep your hair. Black Panther Wakanda Forever, directed by Ryan Coogler, is the sequel to 2018's Black Panther, and a movie marred in controversy because this film is unfortunately coming out after the passing of the actor who played Black Panther in the MCU, and that is Chadwick Boseman. When Chadwick Boseman passed away, I remember there was a lot of talk online about what they were going to do about this. Something similar happened back in the during the build-up to Star Wars Episode 9 because Carrie Fisher passed away. So the question was, what are they going to do? And that was also Disney. Are they going to do like a thing where they do a deep fake? Were they going to replace him with a different actor, CG him, do a funeral during the film? And that was kind of weighing on Ryan Coogler's shoulders. On top of that, he had to write a script that was as good or as a story as interesting as the first Black Panther, which won a bunch of awards and was very highly regarded. And I just got back from seeing the film, and I'm going to give you my thoughts on it. So first of all, I want to just get this out of the way, is that Ryan Coogler is a great filmmaker. As far as like objectively how to make a good movie, he wins this objectively. Now, whether or not you like this movie, that's the subjective part. But objectively, the guy has really great camera angles, great shots. He really knows how to direct his actors to sort of convey emotions. He's a great filmmaker. He's done nothing but good movies since he's come around. And this is a good movie too. The movie is very respectful to the memory of Chadwick Boseman. Although he did pass away, his spirit is almost there in the film. He's talked about the plot of the film involves consequences that came about when he was around. The characters in the film are all reeling from his death, both the protagonist, antagonistic characters, and the antagonistic characters. They're all sort of, risen from the ashes personality-wise. Their story is really rooted in the decisions and choices that T'Challa made prior to his passing. And the film is very respectful towards him. I mean, he's all over the movie in very respectful ways. And they do it sort of as a double tribute to Chadwick Boseman, the actor, as well as the character T'Challa, the Black Panther. Of course, in this film, if you've seen the trailers, there's a new Black Panther in town, and that part of it is predictable. One thing that this movie did that was similar to what happened in Civil War, because what happens in this film is that, and I'm not going to go into spoilers, this is a non-spoiler review, but the basic plot is that Namor, the Submariner, appears from the civilization that lives underwater, and they have a conflict with Wakanda, which leads to a movie-long story where even though neither of the two nations or factions, whatever you want to call them, are necessarily evil, I think the conscious message, the social political consciousness of this movie is that when people go to war, there are no winners. And that's what the movie conveyed, because even though Namor is the antagonist, he's not a villainous person like, for example, a Thanos could be considered, or Ultron, or somebody like that. Namor has very solid reasons as to why he's so angry. Whether or not it's worth going to war, that's the debatable part. But the movie really is about not just the country of Wakanda and its ordeals with Namor's people, but also Namor and the Black Panther as individuals. And I like how the movie sort of gets to that same conclusion at the very end. And I personally felt like the ending was, I think the ending was definitely satisfactory. I feel like the issue with the film is that his sister, T'Challa's sister, and again, no spoilers, played by Letitia Wright Shuri, she goes through a similar character arc as Chadwick Boseman's character did. But it's actually artistically done, I would say, a bit better here because they kind of take a page from the original Star Wars trilogy. You know, she has to deal with the dark side and the light internally, inside of her. There's a conflict going on because there's something that happens to her in the movie, a tragic event, and she is both feeling somewhat guilty about what happened to her brother, even though it wasn't really her fault, and what's going on with Wakanda and Namor. And so she is conflicted big time. There are some surprise cameos, which I had heard about. I had heard about a big cameo in this movie by a big actor a few months ago, actually. I'm not sure if I talked about it here on the channel, and it did indeed happen. And that was kind of where they kind of played with the whole dark side, light side, like, will she seek vengeance? Very similar to how T'Challa was against the Winter Soldier in Civil War. You know, he kind of went through that himself. And this movie sort of plays those plot threads again in a similar way. Now, if I'm being honest with you, though, that did, to me, take points away from the film, if I'm being honest. We are seeing the same story again. You know, obviously it's the same steak with a different dressing, but it's still the same steak. And I've always felt like Coogler is a much better storyteller than that. And the story was told effectively. I'm not saying it wasn't, but it's something that we've already seen before. And I was kind of hoping the movie would go in a different direction when it comes to that. So I will say that the movie, to me, I don't think it's as good as the first one. I also don't put it in the upper tier of the MCU films. It's a good movie. It's not a great movie. And I think a lot of people are going to go into this expecting it to be a great movie. There's some great acting here, though. Lupita Nyong'o is back in the film as Nakia. Very, very, very emotional. You know, being, of course, T'Challa's, I guess you can say, widow. She's been through a lot. And Lupita plays her as somebody who's been through a lot. All of Wakanda has been through a lot. You know, it's unquestionable. Now, the one thing I will say is that this film does tie into Ironheart. I'm not going to go into spoilers, but it does serve to introduce characters from that. And as a result of that, the movie is, you know, it's going to be one of those movies that as you're doing your rewatch in years to come, you're going to have to see it because of that factoid. But I don't know. I feel like when it comes to replayability, this is not like Infinity War where I was dying to go back to the movie theater, or Civil War. Like, I loved some of the things they did in the movie. Didn't like some other things. I think the second half of the movie is spectacular compared to the first half. I really like that. But the big third act, like, finale, the big action piece, I don't think was anywhere near as good as the one from Infinity War or even the first Black Panther. It was fine, but it just wasn't on the same level in any way. And I don't know if they maybe toned it down purposely so that they can kind of have a more back-to-basics approach to this. But I felt it was not as spectacular, but it was still spectacular in what we saw. You know, when I mentioned a minute ago about how Ryan Coogler's a great storyteller, what I'm referring to specifically when I say that is not necessarily the script, because I did feel the script was kind of weak in some parts. I'm talking about the way he actually puts his movies together and edits them. Like, he's a great visual storyteller. And also, something else that stood out to me about this movie is the soundtrack. This movie has one of the most unique soundtracks of any Marvel film. It doesn't sound anything like, I don't know, Spider-Man No Way Home or Thor Love and Thunder, which all have different sort of music. You know, Love and Thunder had tons of, like, Guns N' Roses love. This movie, the music was done by somebody named Ludwig Göransson, who is the same guy who did the soundtrack for Creed and Creed 2. So he's worked with Coogler before. His soundtrack here was very, very cultural, like tribal cultural, and it really fit with the Black Panther and Wakanda story. Like, it was a different kind of soundtrack. You know, there's a song on the soundtrack by Rihanna that really does capture the emotion. The movie's filled with emotion, tons of it, based on the passing of Chadwick Boseman. I mean, if I were to just tell you, the movie's almost like almost 2.5 hour tribute to Chadwick Boseman. That's the best thing to take away from the film, is how much they love that guy. You know, for all intents and purposes, everything we've heard about him, he seemed like a genuine dude, and it's unfortunate that he actually passed away so young. This guy was in some of the biggest movies of all time, and he loses his life. Had a bright career ahead of him, and his family would have been, I mean, they're gonna be okay, but you know what I mean? Like, it's a tragedy to lose somebody that young. But I do want to say a couple more things. I really, really enjoyed Tena Huerta Meja's performance as Namor. It's interesting they chose a Mexican actor to play Namor. I'm not going to go into the whole Disney diversity thing because that's a controversial topic that has nothing to do with the film. Because ultimately, he is a good actor. He did well in the role. It's not the same Namor that I would have pictured from the classic Marvel comics. Namor's the oldest. I believe he's the oldest Marvel character, 1936. I think if not, he's in the top 5 oldest. But he did it right. I will say there were things that were a disappointment, namely Martin Freeman's character of Everett Ross, who had a much bigger role in the first Black Panther. He does virtually nothing in this movie. He doesn't do almost anything. Like I wondered why they even put him in the film, to be honest with you. They could have cut most of his stuff out. Like, I know that, he does have a couple of scenes there, but it's not anywhere near as important as what he did in the first film. Like, they didn't need him, is what I'm trying to say. The film overall has very much a coming-of-age story vibe to it, while also sort of giving us the commentary about the victims of war, is the family and friends and the individuals involved in it, and how others can profit off of war. And it also does play off of the whole vibranium thing, because vibranium, this whole story of Wakanda starts with vibranium. That's where it's at, and that still comes into play here. I think when it comes to the ultimately like how important this is to MCU Phase 4, I don't feel it's like Phase 4 is over. This is the last Marvel product in Phase 4. The next one's going to be Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and that's Phase 5 officially. But when I look back at which of these movies were important for Phase 4, which I may do a whole review on it now, a whole video on it, I feel like this one is somewhere in the middle. I don't think it's as important as the events of something like a Loki or like a No Way Home, which are going to have major effects for things going on in the future. Or even like a WandaVision, But it certainly, if you look at it as a tribute to Chadwick Boseman, it's a lovely film that you really can't say anything bad about because of how much love is put into it. You can tell that the editing and the directing is stellar. It's just that it's not perfect. If I look at it objectively and remove the emotion, it is sort of somewhat of a repetitive storyline to a degree, and it's sort of like a baby version of the first film. I thought the first film had a bigger scope, more grander. But this movie, I had fun with it. I had fun with it. A lot of the Namor people of the ocean kind of reminded me a lot of, for some reason, Avatar. Like, they had like the Avatar thing going, and there was an Avatar trailer before the film came out, before the film started. So maybe that was in my head, but it really brought back like that Avatar vibe. Anyways, that is my review, non-spoiler, for Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. I'll see if I can do a spoiler one tomorrow or the day after. For now, take care, and I'll talk to you soon.